Bridging Gaps, the business podcast with Deborah Levitt, sharing the challenges and stories of fellow business owners. Hello, this morning I have Sam Gold of Gold HR with me. Hi, Sam.
Hi, Deborah. Lovely to be with you.
Really pleased that you could join me today. How are you?
I'm really well. Thank you very much. Enjoying the lovely Easter weather, obviously.
Yes, such a lovely sunny break we're not having. So, Sam, you're from Gold HR, and I was just wondering if you could tell me a little bit about Gold HR.
Okay, well, thanks ever so much for having me on this morning. Yes, so my business is Gold HR. So we're an outsourced HR company who specialise in working with small to medium-sized businesses to help them with their people. So we generally work with owner-managers. Owner-managed businesses. I get my words out eventually. So ambitious business owners that are looking to take their businesses forward, are looking for success but need their people to help them get there. So we help with a number of different areas and work with them to help them achieve that.
And do you start with people who are, they're a solo operator and looking to take on their first one, or do you tend to deal more with people who already have employees in place?
Probably a bit of both, actually. Often we will help people that are just starting out. They've made the decision that actually the workload's got to a point where they need to take somebody on. So we'll have conversations with people and advise them sort of next steps there. And then we do also work with the bigger businesses that maybe do have a number of employees already who are looking to take that next step. So it's often about they're looking to move forward, and actually the way they're going to succeed is by making the most of the people that they take on. So I'd say it's probably a bit of both.
Okay. And how do you find, so I'm just going to focus for a moment on the people who are just about to take on their first employee. And do you find that when they come to you, do they know what they need and the real costs associated with bringing on that person? Or is it more of oh my God, there's too much work to do, I'm going to have to hire somebody, and not really clear on where to go?
I think it's probably the second one. I think what tends to happen is the business owners are doing well, they're getting orders in, they're getting money through the door, they know they can't cope with it all. And actually they don't really know what they need, and that is often one of the biggest problems that people do have, is that they know they need help, they know they can't do it all themselves, they know for their business to move on and succeed they need somebody else to come on board, but they haven't really sat down and thought about what help it is that they genuinely need. And that's often where the biggest challenge comes, because it's the panic that I can't fill all those orders, I can't do this myself, but they haven't really taken a step back to think about, this is really what I need from somebody else to help me that will genuinely help me.
And is that something that you are then able to help them with, to identify where the real benefit is going to come in, and to also assess whether or not hiring somebody is the right answer?
Absolutely. And sometimes it isn't, actually. I mean, obviously, what we do is we help businesses hire the right people, but sometimes they're not actually in a place where they need something because they haven't got that clarity of what they need. So we would have a conversation, we'd sit down and understand where they want the business to go. So once we understand that, it makes our advice more tailored. But sometimes actually it's something might be around about the way they're working, the practices they're doing. Can those be refined? Actually, maybe outsourcing is an option. Maybe bringing somebody in on a sort of a fixed term basis might be an option. There's other options to taking on a permanent employee that might be sort of a bridging step to taking that big decision. Because I think for some people, and it's a really big decision to say, I'm going to take on my first employee, because all of a sudden it's not just paying your bills, you're paying somebody else's bills, and that makes people really nervous, really, really nervous. So as a transition, what's often quite a good way is to think, well, actually, let's work out what you need. Let's go through what are the types of activities you'd want somebody to be involved in and to do for you, and what's the best way to get that. And again, it might be that you go to a virtual assistant, it might be you get a freelancer in. There's all sorts of options to think about, which can actually sort of help you transition to make that decision, say, actually, I am there now, I can make that commitment, and I can pay 2 wages.
And are people realistic about the real cost? So is it that they look and they think, okay, well, I'm going to hire somebody, I'm going to need to pay them, I don't know, $25,000 a year, and therefore I need to earn an extra $25,000? Or do they look at that and they go, well, actually, the real cost of that employee is, I don't know what it is, but it's more than their actual salary? Are they, I guess, cognizant of those extra costs that you incur?
Some are, some aren't. And you're absolutely right. When you take somebody on physically onto the books, it's not just the cost of the salary. There's all sorts of extra overhead costs, which we would call on cost. So you've got tax, you've got NI, you've got physicality of where they're going to be, kit, pensions, all sorts of other things. And I would probably say in the main, most people probably are quite aware that it isn't just salary costs, that there is more. And I think that it's translating the overall cost. So let's say, as a rough indication, I would probably add on around about 25% to a salary to give you an idea of the additional on cost for taking on an employee. And then you translate that into how many more sales have I got to make to cover that. That can be quite good in many ways, because you think, well, actually, it depends what you sell, obviously. I've only got to sell 45 widgets to cover that in a period of time. But what people sometimes do forget to do is to do that translation back and really think about, well, actually, what do I have to do, or how many sales do we have to make in order to cover that person's cost? And then anything over and above that obviously then starts to go into profit.
And presumably there's a time impact though as well, because whereas before you were the one who was, your time was essentially your own. So to sell 45 widgets, you could go, well, actually, I'm just going to do that all day today. I'm just going to be on the phone selling widgets. But now that you've got somebody else, you actually need to spend time speaking to them and actually communicating and working together. So does that come into it as well? That almost, I used to be able to do 8 hours a day. Now I'm doing 6 because 2 hours are working with my new employee or whatever the numbers are.
Yeah, and I think for some people it's letting go as well. There's an element within there. It's when you take on somebody else to work with you. Probably up to that point you've done it all. You've been marketing, finance, sales, deliverer, whatever it might well be. You have done all of it, and all of a sudden you are taking a leap of faith in somebody to say, I need somebody else to help me. And that's a bit of a journey, and some people are better at delegating and allowing somebody else to come into that area than not. I think for a lot of owner-managed businesses, there can be a transition. They can find that quite a challenge, and that will come through trust. So they need to be able to see that the person that they've taken on can do what they want or is delivering what they need. And that comes back to probably one of our earlier points of being clear what you're looking for. Because if they're not clear what they're looking for, that person can't deliver. So it's a bit of a cycle. You need to be clear. You need to understand what you're going to be asking for somebody. That person then understands what's expected of them. They're then able to demonstrate that they can do what you need, and that then builds the trust. And it allows that owner to be able to take a bit of a step back to say, oh, actually, I can now spend time on my business. We all talk about on and in our businesses, don't we? But actually that way they've got the ability to say, well, actually, whoever it might well be will now take care of that for me. I can now go out and look for more sales. I can now, feed that pipeline. But it takes time, and it is a transition. It's not my baby anymore, or it is still your baby, but actually somebody else is just going to help you, make it a success.
So it's going through, I guess, being realistic about it not being an instant, I've hired somebody, the world has changed immediately and I can start, doing whatever else it was that I'd planned. It's allowing for that, I guess, that learning curve for the new person to come in, and also for you to get used to having that person there, and for that team to form as a bit of a dynamic. Would that be fair?
Yeah, I think it is.
Yeah.
And I think it comes back to the point of it's trust. I need to be able to trust that, you understand my business, you get what we sell, you know what I need you to do, and I can see you're doing a good job. I think one of the key things that business owners often have is that they are exceptionally dedicated to their business. They work really hard, they've put everything into it, and they take somebody on, and that person doesn't have quite the same level of commitment as them. And I don't think that's unreasonable that they don't, actually. It's not necessarily their mortgage or, their house on the line. But that doesn't mean that those individuals can't be every bit as dedicated to delivering a great result. But it's transition. It's very much transition. It's for both parties. And smaller businesses, I think it's a challenge, is what are we both looking for here? And it's the clarity. And that, for me, is the key part at the very start of what I need. What do I need to help me? And in all honesty, that can change as well. It might be what you think you need at the start when you actually start using somebody, you have somebody else working with you, that also evolves as well, because you suddenly think, well, actually, I could get them to do this now, or they could be doing that. And that might not be where their skill set is as well. So roles do move on, and business owners, their requirements move on as well. So there's also an understanding of keeping an open mind to how things change.
And I guess that's where going through that transitional phase in terms of outsourcing would also help, because you would start to see whether what you thought you wanted was really what you wanted, and help to define that role description. Yeah.
Absolutely. And that is often where we'll start. And that's often the conversation I have with business owners, is that they don't really know what they need. They just know that they're full to capacity. They can't do anything more. They need somebody. And you're absolutely right, once you've taken somebody on and somebody's doing X job, it's not always that easy to make those changes. So if you start by using a freelancer or a temp or whatever it might well be, it's a step in that direction, and it gives you that opportunity to assess what's going to make the biggest difference to me.
And how did you get into this, Sam? So, obviously you're running Gold HR, but your background, if I'm not mistaken, is that you were in corporate initially?
I was, yes. So I've had about 22 years in HR now, and I've done public sector and private sector, and I've done all my professional qualifications while I was employed. And about 5 years ago, I was working for Centrica and the AA. And I think I've been there about 10, 11 years. Lots and lots of changes, absolutely loved it. And I worked with the small business units. So although I was working on the AA side, the patrol side, I worked with the small businesses that sat within that. And I think the thing for me that I found was that HR isn't really as complicated sometimes as I think it's made out to be. But I do know as a small business, you don't necessarily need a full-time resource. You don't need somebody permanently available, but you do need somebody to call on. So I suppose in that time, I was working for a number of different units, sitting on the management teams, and it was really interesting. But I could also see how HR can have a really big impact on small businesses. So we'd gone through acquisition at the time, and it was an opportunity arose where they were restructuring, and I've been doing a bit of consulting with a friend of mine, and I really enjoyed it, and I liked the flexibility it gave me, and I thought now was the right time. So I set up the business for a couple of reasons. There was one was to help small businesses that don't need that full-time or permanent resource to get access to affordable quality HR support, because things sometimes don't always go as we would like them to. And the other side of it as well was very much in order to give me the ability to be with my family as well. So by running my own business, as we all know, people that do it, there's swings and roundabouts for all these things, but it does give me that ability to go to sports days or parents' evenings, which in the corporate world was much, much harder.
I know I was speaking to somebody the other day who was saying that now he's got that choice to say, actually, this morning I'm going to my grandson's sports day. And whereas, as you've said exactly, in the corporate world, it would have been, okay, I'm missing that, or it required a huge amount of planning to enable it to happen, and worries about how long you were going to be out for. So it's definitely having those choices makes a huge difference with your family and friends and life generally, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And I think lots of business owners I know set up businesses for that reason, to have that flexibility, to have that choice. And there's all sorts of things that come into it, lots and lots of juggling, we all know, that goes on as part of it, lots of skills to learn that maybe you didn't have in the corporate world, but it's definitely a lifestyle choice as well as part of it.
And so how did you find that transition? Because a lot of people I've spoken to, you come out of corporate, you've got a specific skill and you're good at what you do. And as you've just said, you discover that now there's a huge number of other things that you may have been aware of. You may have just not really thought about them too much because in corporate they were being taken care of. But now it all lands on your shoulders.
It does, absolutely. And that was probably one of the things that I had no real preconception of, actually. I think as I've been doing a bit of consultancy work, I've been doing the work. And I hadn't really had to think about the other side of it. And all of a sudden you have this business and there's lots and lots of things you need to think about. And you are fed in the corporate world, you have your job and it's all provided. Work comes to you, you're paid, you've got IT support, the marketing's going on, it just happens. And all of a sudden that is you. And I think however prepared or however much reading you go through, I don't think you ever are completely prepared for that. I've always enjoyed HR. I've always enjoyed what I do. I enjoy working with people. I enjoy working with businesses. I enjoy seeing the transition that goes on. But I think for me, there's been a lot of upskilling required from my own perspective in those peripheral things, sales and marketing, IT. I can't just pick up the phone to the IT department anymore when the laptop doesn't work. So there's some things that I miss like that. I do like the IT support. But the other side of it actually is you start to build yourself into being a business person, which I was a corporate person before. And it means I feel now, and I've still got a journey that I'm going on. I would love to say that I'm proficient in every single area, obviously, but there are still learning outcomes for me in those as well. But what it does do is it means that I'm far more able to understand the clients I work with. I understand what being a small business is because I'm one myself. So I know the challenges that people face. And we have areas of expertise that, that's why we do the jobs we do. And what I have learned is that you outsource the bits that you will spend a huge amount of time on, which aren't necessarily giving you the greatest value. Do what you're good at. Within reason, and I appreciate that not everybody has got the cash flow to do that at times, but where you can, outsource what you can to help support you so that you can focus on what you are good at and bringing that business in.
And that is the challenge, isn't it? It's getting those skills and then getting to a point where you can acknowledge that, you are good at certain things. We all are. But then there are other things that just aren't our strengths. And Absolutely. Being able to go, actually, okay, I'm now at a point where I'm going to pay somebody else to do this. And in the build up to it, being conscious that, yes, this is something you can get hand to somebody else at some future point, but right now you do have to learn it.
Absolutely.
So how did you find so a lot of people I've spoken to as well have talked about the fact that, again, you've come out of that corporate environment, there's people all around you, and now you're by yourself. So have you found any of the, I guess, loneliness or isolation that sometimes follows when you start up your own business?
It is different, and at times, yes, I think that you've worked as part of a team, often a big team. It's not just you, there's a number of you, and then all of a sudden, in reality, it is just you. And I think the thing that I have benefited the most from is building my own network of people that I work with, I collaborate with, that I get support from and hopefully get support from me. And that has been fundamental. It can be a lonely place. It can be, and at times you will, you'll work on your own for a week, and that's could be really hard sometimes. But I think I like the team environment type of thing, and I think that's probably, I like people, maybe that's where it comes from. So I think even from quite early on, I was quite able to, and I collaborate really, really well with other HR people. So I've had a network, I've always had a network, and I have now, and that's developed. Obviously you and I work together at times, and I have a really, really great supportive network that gives me what I need without having to be in the bigger corporate world. But that does take time to build and cultivate.
I think that is the difficult part, isn't it? It's not there instantly for most people.
Yeah.
And giving it that time and finding the people who you actually do click with and who you go, actually, I can, have that relationship, which is more than just a collaboration, more than just a business associate, and that they are providing that team support around you. Absolutely. And and it makes a huge difference to just everyday life, I think.
It does, I would agree.
How did you find people? So just in terms of, and this is maybe both clients and business buddies, are you networking, or, how are you extending out your tentacles? Well, the Sam has tentacles.
At the moment. How do you meet people? I think it's a bit of a combination. I think you start off networking. You do start off networking, and I'm sure where we all started was you went to almost every networking event in the local area, and you would have spent a fortune and a huge amount of time and drunk a load of tea and eaten lots of breakfasts. So I think the majority of the people that I collaborate with or are business buddies with now, I will have met through the networking scene, but they won't necessarily have been a direct network meet. It might be that I've met somebody there who I've then said, oh, you get on really well with X, you get on really well with Deborah, or Rebecca, or whoever it might well be, I'll introduce you. And that's sort of where it comes. So when we talk about networking, it's not, I think when I started out, and I think again we probably all start here, you think networking is selling. It really isn't. You're not selling to people in the room. You're there to help, and you're there to meet people, and we're all there to support each other. And I think in the main, my experience of the people I've met have been that most people want to support each other in the small business world. We're all in the same boat. We've all got the same challenges. Some of us are better at some areas than others, and if we can help each other, all well and good. Even if we're in competition. And I would say within my network of people, I've got really good business buddies who are in direct competition with me, but then it doesn't feel that way. But I've met those people through meeting somebody at a networking event saying, oh, I know another HR consultant, I must introduce you. And I now have an amazing network of associates on the HR front that we work together. Absolutely amazing. So I think it's a combination. The other side about business, I think, that's interesting, and it's probably taken me a little while to get there, is actually referrals, working with trusted partners, whereby you can say, actually, I know somebody that can help you. Because we all come into contact with business owners or businesses that have got different needs at different times. And what you want to be able to do is to be a trusted source, just to say, I know somebody that's really great at that. Have a chat with them. There's no expectation or obligation, but you are also then in a nice position to say, I can help. It may not work, you may need to go somewhere else, but actually I can put you in touch with somebody. So referrals as well, working with other people to help build those networks between you, has been quite fundamental for me.
And it is, I always find it interesting now how, sort of a couple of years down the road, that suddenly when somebody says, oh, I've got such and such, I think, oh yeah, I do know somebody who can help you with that. And it is amazing how your network changes from when you're in, that corporate environment where you've kind of got your business network, which is either people you work with in the same company, or, you might have associates outside of that, and then your personal network. And now they do seem to intermingle a lot more as well.
Absolutely.
So just to go back to the where you were saying that you work with a lot of other HR consultants and they're part of your network as well. How did that feel? Because I think a lot of people coming in to networking are almost defensive. So, I'm here, I'm an HR consultant, and I'm ultimately, we're all looking for business, whatever route it takes to get to it. Yeah. Did you find that you were initially defensive, or were you always open to actually, yes, so that's great, you're another HR consultant, let's see what we can do together? How did that work for you, I guess?
That's really interesting. I think when I started out, I genuinely thought everybody would be, you're looking after yourself. And I went along to I'm a member of the CIPD, the Chartered Institute of Personnel Development, and they run networking sessions for independent consultants. So I went along to a couple of those, so there's lots of me in the room, and I met a couple of people through there. And yeah, you're absolutely right. The initial thing was, well, why would I share what I'm doing with you? Why would I? It wasn't like that at all. People in the room, and maybe it's our profession, but I was talking to a colleague the other day exactly about this, about how within our profession, and maybe I'm just lucky, I don't know, about how well we do collaborate. About how well we share knowledge, we share skill, we help each other, we work as associates for each other, we're friends, we talk about all sorts of things. And it was a real eye-opener. And I remember the first meeting we went to, they were talking about how much to charge. And I was sitting there thinking, I had no idea how much to charge. And they were quite openly, so well, I charge X, I charge Y. And I thought, oh my gosh, I never had any idea that people would share that type of information. So, as I said, I don't know whether it's just my profession and whether it's just that we are that way. There are pockets, I would say, within what I do that doesn't happen. There are particular areas which will not collaborate with you in the same way. And that's far more competitive and business focused, possibly. But it wasn't my expectation at the start. I really genuinely didn't think that people would be this supportive and helpful. But I think where we do come into our own is in the jobs we do. Often there'll be a number of stages to the support we provide, and probably what I'm talking about here is maybe some more of the nitty-gritty discipline and grievance that come through. But actually, in an ideal world, you as an HR consultant, you don't do every stage. You bring different people in that haven't been involved. So to be able to have a network, to be able to say, actually, I've got an independent person that can come in and help, is a real benefit to my business and to my clients. So there's a benefit for us on both sides as well.
So as you say, you can play the role that is, you've got the skills to play all the roles, but within the HR aspects of it.
Yeah.
But you can choose which ones it makes most sense for you to play in any given business relationship and utilize your associates to, as you say, provide that independent view or that different angle on something.
Absolutely. I mean, we will often go out and we'll get somebody to hear a hearing or an appeal, or if there's an area of expertise that one of us is better at, we'll use them, because ultimately it's about making sure that our clients are getting the best. We're all strong in all areas, but some of us are stronger in others, and you're pulling on people's expertise in that way.
Which is really great, and that sounds like it works for you and for the client as well, because they're getting the best service without it being a case of, well, I can do everything, therefore I'm not going to let anybody else in. It's no, actually this person is better, or this situation is really going to benefit from having another consultant involved.
Absolutely. And I think that as an industry, we are quite good at understanding and providing access to the expertise that people need.
And have you seen, and you may not have done, but have you seen whether that seems to be reflected in other industries as well, or?
Actually, yeah, as I said, I was talking to a colleague the other day about exactly this, about collaboration. And I think the general feeling is that some of the professional services, which I would probably say we fall into, finance, that type of thing, IT, there will be other collaborations, but possibly not to the same extent that I feel that we're collaborating at the moment. So I think there is a difference. I think collaboration, referral goes on for everybody. I think there's a benefit for any business with regard to that network. And I think that if you build the right relationships, you get both, all businesses get a huge amount out of it. But I think the level of which collaboration takes place and that support is different. He made a really interesting comment. He said he'd been to a networking event and there'd been some other, I think they were insurance people in the room. So there was 3 insurance people in the room. And he said it was a really different dynamic to when you've got 2 or 3 HR people in the room. He said it was quite competitive between these insurance people. Whereas you get HR people in the room, generally I tend to find that I always end up talking to them. You don't know they're the HR person at the time, but you get drawn to them. But even he noticed that there's a different dynamic. So I think collaboration, working together, networking, all of that, I think all industries do. Because we can all see that, like a website designer, they do parts of the website design, they can't necessarily do the back end. You link in with people that can help develop the service that you provide. And along the way, you make some great friends as well, I have to say. So that's been another benefit for me out of all of it.
And if you were speaking to somebody who was about to start a new business, whether they were in HR or any other area, are there any, I guess, tips or pieces of advice that you'd say that you'd want to share with them?
That's a very good one. It's been a real journey for me, and something that I probably came to later on, but I wish I'd done at the start, is being clear on why I was doing it. So what were my drivers for doing, what were my goals? And I think I mentioned earlier on what sort of, I had 2 sides, the business and the personal side of it. But goals were really important. And actually setting some clear goals so that I really knew. So although I knew I wanted to do it to help small businesses, and actually I wanted to give myself a particular lifestyle with my kids, what I didn't do was necessarily put some clear goals down that actually this is what I want to achieve. So that was really fundamental. And since I've done that, my clarity around where I'm looking to go and how I achieve that has helped. And the other side is about building that network. It's about having that support, working with people, that you complement each other, and that you can go to and ask that silly question that you sort of think maybe you can't do. So having a network, you might work on your own and you might be stuck in your office for periods of time, but to be able to pick up the phone and say, I've got this issue or I've got this going on, and to be able to talk to somebody makes it a less lonely place.
And loneliness is a key thing, which I think does take people by surprise, because we see that working from home, that flexibility, and we see all the positives about it. Yeah. And it's not until you're actually in it that you miss the person sitting next to you who you could just turn around and, have a little whinge to or ask a question or whatever it was. So,
and that's really important, I think, actually. I think it is really important, and that's probably the bit for me that I did miss the most to start with. And through building those relationships with people, you get that back.
So moving on just a little bit. So you've got a lovely husband, there's 3 children in the household. How do you find balancing, their needs and your needs with them, as well as keeping the work? How do you manage to keep yourself and them happy? Or do you?
That's a really good question. Maybe if you ask them, they might not say I do. I don't know. I hope
Hang on.
I'm just going to check now. It is a lot to balance. And I think whichever way you cut it, my husband runs his own business as well as being employed. So between us, there's a lot. With 3 kids, it's a lot to keep plates spinning. And sometimes you don't always get the perfect balance. Sometimes it's incredibly difficult to get there. But the decision I made quite early on is I wanted to be around when they break up, I finish from school in the day. So that's generally what I do. Does it happen every day? Probably not. But it's about being clear on what your parameters are and what you're doing and why you're doing it. Being organised and understanding what your key things are that you need to deliver. Early on, it's very easy to get distracted by things that are nice, shiny objects, and I hope I'm better at managing that now, but it's being focused on what you really need to deliver and how you're going to deliver it. And sometimes you do have to push the boundaries. Sometimes you will work late, sometimes you will have to get somebody else to pick them up. It's part of what it is. But if you manage your time well, and I've had to learn this, manage my time well, can I do it better? Probably. It gives me the ability to service all the things I need. Outside of work, I spend a lot of my time running my girls around. They both swim a lot. And I spend a lot of time at the local sports centres. So
I think a lot of my communications with you come from a swimming pool somewhere.
Absolutely, they do. I'm sat in the sports centre, possibly poolside, possibly not, trying to catch up with things, and I do. So it's also utilising time where I am with them to do other things that actually I maybe can prioritise for another time. So I'm not sure there's a perfect answer to all of that, and it's plates spinning sometimes to keep it where it needs to be. And the other bit as well is it's communication between you and Michael. We've both got a lot that we're trying to achieve and to keep spinning. And without that, it would be almost impossible to do.
And do you find, obviously, there's a lot of focus these days on well-being generally, on mental health. Lots of focus for people to be looking after themselves, and not just physically but mentally. How do you make sure that you're well?
Okay, and you're absolutely right. I mean, in the world of work in general, whether you're employed or whether you work for yourself, mental health and well-being are critical, because without that, you can't do what you need to do, whether that's personally or business. So for me personally, there's a couple of things I do genuinely enjoy spending time with my kids. They give me a huge amount of satisfaction is the wrong word, but I get a lot out of being with the kids. But I run, so my intention each week is to run 2 or 3 times a week. So I'll usually run 5k a couple of times a week to keep my own sanity. I haven't been very well for a couple of weeks, so I haven't run, and I notice instantly by not doing that my general health and well-being, I don't feel as good. I'm not as productive, I'm not as bright, I'm not where I need to be. So for me personally, I'm quite driven by exercise. So if I'm not in the gym, I'll go into a class or something like that. So that gives me what I need. And if I've had a really stressful day, it's wonderful.
And so do you make sure that you've got time for that? Is that something that you will, you allow yourself to have that as a priority so that you can put it in, unless you're as you say, unless you're not well at the moment.
Yeah, I will do. So again, comes back to being down the sports centre quite a lot. I will generally absolutely, and that's what makes it work actually. So I do. There's a couple of nights a week I know I can get there because the girls are where they need to be. I'm at the sports centre and I can run. So I don't do a lot of outside running. Most of it is treadmill running. For those of you that are runners, I'm sorry, but yes, so I can build it in as part of that. But I do make time, and I also there's a few bits and pieces we were talking about earlier on about morning routine and things that I've got into a bit of a habit of doing, and some of those are driven around health and well-being. So even silly little things like having a glass of water in the morning, doing a 5-minute meditation at some point during the day has all really helped me and my focus. So without that, I know that I don't feel as good. So I'm much better at making time for me, because if I'm where I need to be, everybody else generally gets what they need out of that as well. So I think as a small business owner, I think it's really important that you do find some time each day to get what you need out of it, however small that might be. And that's about intention. And sometimes it's changing our mindset and the way we think about things to make that happen.
And do you think that your views on that have changed since you were an employee to becoming, running your own business? Or do you think that focus was always there for you?
I think my mindset has changed. I've always been quite reasonably fit. So I've always been a member of gym. I've always gone and done something like that. So physically, but where I didn't have the other pressures. So where I went to work and I came home, and yes, I worked long hours, but I had time. And then obviously children come in and you have no time, or you're trying to do it all. You start to realise that if you're not looking after you, if you're not where you need to be, you cannot do what you need to do for others, whether that is your family, whether that is your clients, whether it's your friends. You do need to. So I think more recently, probably in the last couple of years, I've started to understand, as I get older as well, that the need for me to look after me, to be able to give what I need elsewhere.
It's not a luxury, it's a necessity.
Absolutely. And I maybe don't do as much sometimes as I would like. My intention is always there. I gave my kids the lecture the other day about don't say try, you're going to do, or you're not going to do. So, and I'm very much the same. I try in as I said there, I attempt to make sure that my mindset and the way I'm approaching things is what I intend to do. And I push towards that.
And that there's something about being realistic as well, in terms of making sure that we can set goals, we can set objectives, but if they're not realistic, then actually trying to achieve them isn't going to work. Whereas if you've set a goal that is absolutely attainable, then I think you're much more likely to deliver on it and potentially exceed it as well. So it's giving yourself the satisfaction of achieving it, rather than setting something so far away that you're actually setting yourself up to fail.
And sometimes it's about is having that bigger goal, but then you break it down.
Exactly.
So that's the other side, is that my goal last year was to run 5k personally, so I can do that now. So my goal this year is to run 10k. That's more of a challenge, not actually because of I can't run 10k, but actually it's an hour running, and after a while on the treadmill, and I know everybody that runs out on the road will tell me go out on the road and it's so much better. I know. But actually, an hour just padding around the treadmill is not the most exciting. So it's also, you are absolutely right, it's being realistic, but it's breaking it down.
Yes.
And I talk about this with my daughter quite a lot, that she's going for swimming times, and she's got some quite big times to make. But it's looking at, what are the small things that you can do to start breaking that time down and working towards. And that's no different from what we do in our goals and our setting, whether it's a health, wellbeing, business or whatever. But I think that probably comes back to the whole point of having goals and objectives, so that you've got something tangible to work towards that keeps you focused.
Yeah, and something to celebrate as well when you actually achieve those, those smaller steps, and you can see that you're heading to where you want to be.
Absolutely.
Well, this has been really wonderful, Sam. Thank you very much. Is there anything you'd like to say just before we wrap up?
I've thoroughly enjoyed talking to you, so thank you very much for spending the time with me. But if anyone's got any questions with regards to, or they're thinking about taking on their first employee, I'd be very, very happy to have a chat and see whether or not I can help you at all.
That is lovely. Thank you very much, Sam. You've been listening to Deborah Levitt on Bridging Gaps, the Business Podcast.